itself is set in the 90s in London, and yeah, it's based on a real-life taxi squad gang that were predominantly Irish descent. They were homeless guys themselves, but they preyed on their own community by extorting like a street tax, and a few of these guys actually became quite rich out of it, and eventually got enough money to move back to Ireland. But it's quite a sad story, but it's based on fact.
Right. And how did you research that? I mean, this was something you were aware of, but how did you begin to research the
well, there's not actually a lot of information on these guys. It's something that I stumbled across in one of the big issue magazines, believe it or not. There was an article in there of people's accounts of living on the street, and this guy went into detail of how these gangs preyed on the homeless, and they were like an Irish street mafia, and it was quite harrowing reading what these guys had to go through, because these guys were quite vicious and ruthless.
And is it ancient history, or are there similar gangs working today?
There probably would be similar gangs, probably not Irish, maybe Eastern European possibly, but as I say, this is set back in the 90s. So yeah, there probably would be guys that come and took over the mantle, as it were, but who knows from where.
And so you're first generation Irish, living in London?
Well, I was born in London. My parents are from County Longford, so.
There's, I think, a number of Longford people in the room.
Yeah, Tom Begley's from Longford, our director.
So again, just back to you, Andy. But so, would you be drawn to Irish stories as a writer? Is that?
Yeah, it's growing up in London, I was brought up in a real strong Irish household, and learned Irish music as a kid, and just growing up, everything about what we done was Irish, and going to mass on Sunday and going to Catholic school, and it was just in a different country. It was a big influence on me. And I went out playing music as a kid. Like I was doing gigs from about 12 or 13, so I was bumping into lots of characters and Irish pubs all around the UK really, and just made a big impression on me. These stories. The Irish have been overlooked a lot in the UK, I think, when it comes to film. And there's a lot of stories there that should be told. So this is just the beginning, hopefully.
Yeah, I think it's really refreshing, because you're right. There are very few representations of Irish in British cinema.
Yeah.
I mean, we see them a lot in American cinema, and Irish. There's a great kind of warmth, I think, in representation of Irish in American cinema. But in British cinema, quite often Irish are seen as victims. Quite often you will see sad fellows who may have emigrated and left roots behind, but I think it's very refreshing to see a different perspective. And your perspective as an Irish Londoner is probably more rooted in a reality that it's a more complex kind of picture.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many stories there that haven't been told, especially about the Irish in the UK. Like everyone knows that the Irish built Britain, and just been overlooked quite a lot, especially in British cinema. And I think there's lots of stories there that need to be told. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. So, Tom, over to you. So, you're an Irish director with many films under your belt. But this is your first collaboration with Andy, and can you talk about how you came together on this and what drew you to this story as well?
Well, Andy and I met in a nightclub, again, Sorry, I said no. I met Andy just by chance through another musician in London, and we kind of came together, I think, through default more than anything. He was a beggar, and I felt sorry for him. And I think the Longford thing as well, to kind of help to, as soon as I spoke to him on the phone, we formed this relationship, and from then on, we just never looked back. I mean, I've never worked with anybody like him. He's just so easygoing, and it's great to work with a really good producer, writer, and somebody who's not afraid to change their script. Some writers are very, very protective of their writing, and they don't want to change it, But fair play to Andy, no bother at all. But then, just do whatever you have to do, he said, just to get it done. So, yeah. Well, this is not my first. I've done 2 projects with Andy. We've done a music video as well quite recently, but this is the first short film.
And could Can you tell us briefly about the germination of the film and how long the whole process took? How big of a shoot did you have and how was it budgeted, without going into too many financial details?
Well, I suppose we started shooting, was it last April, I think? Yeah, last April. We done 2 weekends, I think. Yeah, we've done a couple of weekends. Trying to get the locations were quite hard because in London you need a permit to shoot every place. You need a permit to shoot in a phone box. As soon as you put your sticks of your camera on the pavement, they want money from you. They want a permit, and to get a permit you need to go to the council, and that can take weeks and months in some cases, you know. So it was a labour of love, if you like, because some of us have other jobs as well too, and we have other projects going on, you know. So I suppose it took the best part of a year to make a 20-minute film, you know. But we've had to recreate the sound completely. All the sound on this movie was made from scratch. We couldn't use the original sound, so that took quite a bit of time as well.
Speaking of the sound, the music track is very effective. Is that back to you, Andy?
Yeah, that's. I play in a band called the Bible Code Sundays, which is an Irish rock band, so we write all our own material. The songs that you heard today are from our new album that's being released in the next few weeks.
Shameless plug there.
Oh, it could be.
And Tom, your lead, he is the most compelling character. Have you worked with him before?
No, I tell you, we really struggled to get the lead. We were casting for a couple of months, I think, 2 months, to get this guy in, and I only got him through somebody else, you know. We just couldn't get the character we wanted. Myself and Andy, well, we did agree, you know, through the casting process. I mean, we went through everybody, and my wife runs a casting agency as well too. And even through that we couldn't find, so all of a sudden this man came along and both of us looked at each other and said, yes, that is our man. But the guy who played the lead, Johnny, he's in demand, you know, so trying to work around his time as well was quite difficult because he's done Harry Potter, he does everything. He's got this unique look, so we had to work around time, but that's how we got him.
It's very strong. The other strong character, of course, in the film.
Who could that be, I wonder?
Who could that be? So, Mr. Collins, tell us about your work on this film. Did you enjoy working on this particular film? And it wasn't your first time working with Tom, isn't that right?
Actually, it was my first time working with Tom. I think we met and said, yeah.
Oh, sorry, we've done things since.
Since I see.
It was the first thing I've done since, you know, this had gotten big films years ago. It came about through Andy. Andy is in the process of raising funds for the Clan London film, which is very much the history of Irish underworld in London, which it's very close to the truth because I've lived in America and I've lived in the UK and I've always gravitated towards the Irish community and I know a lot of history. And the Clan London film that Andy's working on here, I met him, it was so close to the truth at one stage that I actually had a chat with him and said, you guys change the names here because it's a documentary, so his films are quite real and quite true. And he was saying about the short he'd done, would I like to be a part of it, you know, and I said, yeah, I don't mind. I said, but I'd like to get some, I always fancied doing it. I said, I'd like to get a bit of coaching, a bit of guidance, a bit of tuition, because it's something I'd like to do. But I just don't want to keep showing up with someone at the door and, you know, asking for invitations, which is good, but I'd like to stretch it a bit. So he introduced me to Tom, and we obviously, this one wasn't much of a stretch on really doing this character here, but I enjoyed it as an education. Probably the hardest part for me was when we done the shoot, I think in April and a couple of weekends. I think it was February this year, we came around and said, right, you got to do the sounds and the voiceover. And I'm saying, hey, that was hard because when you're in a warehouse and you're screaming and shouting and in the atmosphere and it's cold, it's easy to be, you know, aggressive and abusive and so on. And you're in the kitchen and looking at pictures of kids on the wall, you want to be this character. that was hard, but it was all educational for me and I enjoyed it. And it's led on to a few more bits and pieces from which I had good fun with, you know. Which yeah, I hope to progress on tomorrow. It's good because it's an education for me, and hopefully if down the road it develops, the more I do, the more I learn, the more comfortable you get other roles, other films that are coming.
We were chatting earlier about boxers turned actors. You're not the first, are you? I mean, I was thinking, I don't know if there's anyone in the audience old enough to remember Jack Doyle Do you, Steve, you've heard of Jack Doyle, who was a Hollywood actor who was born in Cove, I think, in the 30s. So he was an Irish boxer who became a big Hollywood star. The gorgeous game.
He became a Hollywood star, not so much as acting. He was about 6'4". He was as handsome as can be. He had a powerful voice. I suppose he's saying like Joseph Locke type of tenor. And the women just loved him. And I think his life was more of a film than anything else. It's a great story. But he was well known in the Hollywood area for his, I mean, he could act a bit, but he was well known for stealing all the men's women. Well, he was Evita, is it? Movita, yeah. He was paid, seemingly, the story goes that Marlon Brando paid him to leave Movita because Marlon Brando loved Movita, but hadn't got a chance as long as Jack Doyle was in the scene. So he gave him a lot of money, and Jack Doyle just, I think, went to the nearest Irish bar in LA, and unfortunately that was his problem. He was too fond of the beer.
It's funny you should mention Jack actually, because when he died in Paddington in West London in quite similar circumstances. He was on the street quite a lot. It was a really sad ending for Jack, so it's quite funny.
He had a plastic bag in his foot or something else.
Yeah.
It was very sad.
Sad demise, yeah, it's a shame.
So I hope I don't end up that way. If I was 6'4" like Jack Doyle, they were coming to me. Leave these rights to him. Thank you.
So, I am interested, Steve, though, in your attraction to acting. I mean, you did Lockstock, and you've done a number of other films. I mean, is there any similarities to your preparation going into the ring?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't mentioned before. We've asked a question, you've obviously know the answer to it. I explained to people that throughout my boxing career, it was like being on stage and being somebody I'm not, because you have to, get into kind of a persona and be a fighter, like a killing machine. You're going to fight and train and work, and when that's over, then you go back to being a normal self. So in the acting, talking to Tom, I said, I look forward to doing this because I want to get into character and become like an actor, whereas in my boxing career I became the fighter. So a long time. I've lived in Belfast, I've lived in the UK now for the best part of 12, 15 years, and I picked up accents, and I actually find accents quite easy because it's like going back. When I lived in America, I had an American accent because I was an illegal alien, I had to let them to be American, so I developed an American accent. And then in Belfast, you just pick up accents, so I had fun with the accents, and they've worked quite easy for me, so. And pretending to be someone else is, I enjoy it, yeah. I mean, I still have to work and earn money and do bits and pieces, but it's like an outlet, And I do have fun doing it,
Your family, are there children of yours in the film as well?
Yes, the young boy and girl in the hospital is my daughter and son, and they just took to like ducks to water. They really enjoyed it, so we're out there casting for young actors.
Are they with us? Are they here?
No, they're home in the UK. They're very available and they do great Irish accents. So they go, I go. I've got my youngest daughter here. I was just talking about accents. I've got 3 daughters in my travels. My eldest daughter was born in America, my second daughter was born in Ireland, and I moved to the UK. My third daughter was born in the UK, so when I moved, I have a daughter in the States. Just thought I'd let you know that. Questions and answers are entertaining, so maybe I'm just entertaining.
Tom, are there other cast members you'd like to introduce us to?
Oh yeah, one very big. This guy made me look quite nice on TV. Is Hutchie over there? He was kind of my sidekick. Yeah.
Stand up there. So Tom and Andy, will you work together again?
Never.
Definitely, yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure to work with everyone from Mark to Steve to Tom to Susan and all the cast and crew. Yeah, definitely. We've got so many more ideas that we want to get out there, short films, and Tom's got some features that he's going to be doing soon, and I'm going to be doing a feature later this year, hopefully. So we'll definitely work together again, no doubt about that.